Hello to all my collectibles friends. Thank you very much for joining me today. Today I'm going to be talking about pop culture, collectibles, and sports cards for both short-term and long-term buying and selling. What does it mean for you? What does it mean for us? Stay tuned. Hey guys, thank you very much for joining me today. I love talking about all things collectible stuff on this channel, and I'm going to talk about kind of another perspective, just some recent thoughts that I've had surrounding buying and selling collectibles, including sports cards as part of that. I do put out a lot of content about sports cards in particular, but this video is going to be more wide-ranging around sports cards, but also pop culture collectibles, because I think there's a lot of nuance in these markets that isn't really talked about very much. So I think this is an important video. If you are new here, please hit the subscribe button, karate chop the notification bell, as my son and daughter like to say. And if you like what you hear, hit the like button. Doesn't hurt. Well, tippity tap of the like button, would appreciate it. There was a series of tweets over the weekend by Gary Vaynerchuk. Gary V, as many people know. He's a motivational speaker, businessman. He's in all sorts of different things. And I guess most recently, he's made kind of waves over the last couple of years talking about sports cards. And now he has his own NFT line, and he's really kind of big into digging deep into the NFT space. And so I reference him because over the weekend, he had a few really good tweets that I wanted to bring up for this particular video and I agree with him on the point of, being kind of an and person as opposed to an or person, in the sense of what people are buying or choosing to buy, etc. We live in such a polarizing country where it's like you have to pick sides for everything, it feels like, and it seems like it's no different when it comes to buying and selling anything, whether it be collectibles or whatever. And he makes some good points as to picking out different collectibles that he's seeing on eBay, whether it be season one or first generation Transformers, or it might be antique dishes that he had. And essentially these are going for, thousands of dollars. Concert t-shirts, original concert t-shirts that are $1,000. And the first line in his tweet is basically like, why would anybody buy this, essentially? And then the second line is more about like, because they just want it. It's like just because I might not be into something or you might not be into something doesn't mean that somebody's not into that thing. And there's so many different collectible type stuff that is nostalgic for people and has a place for them. It incurs kind of a emotional reaction from them. And that is what draws out a lot of what we're seeing in the collectible space. And it has done historically. That's really been kind of the thing is that something from your childhood that you remembered fondly of and you want to collect that particular thing? Maybe your parents had it. I've got a friend that collects vinyl records because his family used to sit and listen to vinyl records. And that was kind of a family thing that he did with them when he was a kid. And there's a zillion different examples of this across all sorts of different things. Classic cars are a great example. Oh, my grandfather had this, 50s car or whatever it was. That was so amazing. And so I wanted to get one too. There's so much of the nostalgia piece that is tied to it. It's important that we recognize that just because it might not be something for us doesn't mean it's not something for somebody else. And that's why that this is happening. And then on top of it, if we kind of go macroeconomic here, it's like, why are things selling for so much? Well, over the last 12 months, we had almost $4 trillion of stimulus pumped into the marketplace, into kind of the hands of the people that live here in the US anyway. And that money has to go somewhere. And I have to believe that a certain percentage, I don't know what percentage that is, went into these sorts of things because it was all of a sudden, for some people, it was disposable income because not everybody lost their job. Not everybody, needed that money necessarily. And this was something they could put into, this was money that they could put into something like this. One thing that's getting really lost, I think, in the whole kind of discussion about collectibles and the booms and the busts of it is pop culture collectibles nowadays we're talking about multi-generational brands, and that is something that is different than what we've seen previously. When you look at kind of the older, Rock'em Sock'em Robots, or, some of these older brands that were popular, a very common one is Beanie Babies and Pogs. These are kind of the things that were really exciting for, a couple of years, and then they faded away. And actually, Beanie Babies were popular for 4 or 5 years before they actually went bust. But the main point is we're dealing with a different animal when you're talking about collectibles that are tied to massive brands like Star Wars, Disney, which is part of Disney now. Disney kind of has an umbrella of brands underneath that is not going away anytime soon. And when I say multi-generational, it's because, look, my dad had Marvel comic books in the 60s. He didn't keep any of them. Dad, I'm still mad about it. But he had those, and then I grew up with it. I have stuff like that. My kids, guess what? They're also into Marvel stuff. And guess what? Their kids probably will be too. So I think the big differentiator here is which collectibles will be, are going to be the ones. It's not, I'm a believer, and this is just one man's opinion. This is just one talking head on the internet talking about this stuff. But I think that there's going to be certain collectibles that don't fall into the typical cycles that go along with a lot of the nostalgia stuff tied with collectibles. You have a lot of speculation that gets tied to all this stuff. And yes, you will have ebbs and flows like you would in any sort of marketplace. That's normal with any market. Stuff doesn't go up all the time. It doesn't go down all the time. That's just how this is supposed to go. But I think it's more of a matter of, do you believe a brand is going to be relevant in 10 years, 20 years, 30 years, maybe even 50 years? And there's certain brands for me personally, and when I look at like just the Disney umbrella, that's one example because there's so much that falls under it. I don't think they're going to stop making Disney series anytime soon. I don't think they're going to stop making Marvel movies and shows anytime soon. These characters are, the movie business, Hollywood, they're not who are they? What new characters are they creating that are massively popular? I'm sure there's instances here and there, but my point is that they have enough Marvel characters to make movies for the next 100 years if they want to. There's enough storylines there. And now they've got the multiverse and all this stuff where you can go back in time. You can do all sorts of stuff with that. It's really endless. They probably did that on purpose. But you look at certain brands. I look at like The Simpsons. The Simpsons or like Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. These are brands where, they might not be viable in 20, 30 years. Will people remember what it is though in 20, 30 years? Yeah, I think that they will. Will they be interested in some of the products or all of the products or all the collectibles? No, of course not. And that's part of the tricky part, but also part of the fun part is trying to figure out which things are going to be collectible down the line. There's so much merchandise being made of this stuff that there's no guarantee that any of it is going to be worth anything down the road, but there are certain kind of, brands. I think that's the big thing is will a brand stay relevant? Will a character stay relevant? There's certain stuff from the 80s. I was a big, Masters of the Universe and Thundercats. Those were two shows that had action figures, and they do have a pocket of kind of niche collectors, and I'm one of them. I'm one of those people that I keep an eye on the comic books, the original 80s comic books. I keep an eye on the action figures or the things, that are popping up that could be rare, that could be fun to collect. Are there, loads and loads of buyers for Thundercat stuff? No. Will there be loads of them in 30 years? I don't know. Maybe not. It might be completely forgotten. So I think it depends on kind of like, when we talk about the brands, is it something that's lasting? Is there Is there enough of a niche audience that it will still be popular down the line? And then of course you can kind of do these like short-term flips and plays that are fun to do too, where you can kind of speculate on, is there a movie coming out? Is there a show coming out? Is there a new character being introduced? And that is kind of a fun little game in the short-term game that can be played as well. But I think the one thing that is really kind of, again, I don't see it talked a lot about on the internet is the multi-generational brands, and I just don't think that it can be compared to previous generations because they just didn't have it. The merchandising and the marketing, avalanche around characters, and in the 80s, it started in the 80s, really it kickstarted a whole new deal. before the 1980s, and granted, I was born in 81, so, maybe there was stuff like this in the 50s, 60s, 70s, but I just don't see it. When I'm looking at collectible spaces, whether it be toys or gaming or any of these types of things, comic books, of course, you've got vintage comic books going back. You've got some vintage video games that go back a little bit previously to that. You've got, of course, sports cards. We talk a lot about sports cards here. They're vintage sports cards. There's a massive market there for that, and that'll never end. It doesn't matter. Generationally, that's not going to change. It's just going to continue on. It's been going on over 100 years. Sports cards are an established collectible market. Now, modern, ultra modern sports cards, of course, are very risky, because you don't know which players are going to be Hall of Famers. You have no idea, kind of what population reports, what's the supply looking like? What's the graded supply looking like? There's so many. The one thing that is really, really fun about collectibles, it's fun / scary at the same time, is that most of these things that we talk about, unless you have, limited edition, or it's a numbered sports card or something, but a lot of this stuff was printed in the millions or manufactured in the millions. You look at vintage stuff, vintage sports cards, printed in the millions, just nobody took any care of them. And so now you're looking at, the scarcity is all in the quality of the card that's left. How many survived and what's the condition of those cards? And a lot of that is the same with all of this stuff when you're looking at third-party grading and everything else. But the kind of the supply is a massive variable because they could always find a truckload of this stuff somewhere out in the desert. People are collecting video games now. There is a great documentary about Atari where they buried E.T. games out in the desert. And I think they actually found them in this documentary. I'm trying to remember. I'm pretty sure that they did find some. So it was like a rumor, and they actually did go digging for it and find them. Some might say, well, hey, they buried 1 million copies of E.T. That's good if you're a collector. But I think that's kind of a fun kind of nuance, with this is like nobody really knows supply that is raw that's out there in the wild. That could be not even in the U.S., but globally, when you look at a lot of these collectible type things. But that's part of the fun of the game. That's part of the fun of the hunt as well. Trying to find great, copies of these things out in the wild. So guys, let me know your thoughts. Collectibles, are you buying and selling? Which ones are you into? Are you into, the graded action figure space, graded sports cards, or raw stuff, or, video games, or any of the antiquities, coins, stamps, currencies? What are you into? Talk to me about it. I want to hear kind of your story, your strategies would be really cool to hear about. But yeah, I just wanted to throw these thoughts out into the universe, and mainly just kind of getting that point across. The multi-generational brands of these things, I think is going to, have an effect down the line. I don't think it's a typical cycle like what we've seen. And look, again, I know nothing. I'm just another talking head, like another guy throwing his opinion out on the internet. So take it for what it's worth. And that's really it. So guys, I want to hear from you. Have an amazing Monday, and I will talk to you again later.